So when I was invited to give this talk, I asked myself, what would my 30-year-old self ask me about the odds? For sure, it would have been, how do I beat them? So this talk is going to be a little bit about what I'd say to 30-year-old David and a couple of conclusions and adventures that I had along the way. So join me on this journey. Dear David, there are far too many variables to control. So instead of trying to beat the odds, prepare yourself and be open and flexible to what the universe brings your way. This doesn't mean don't have goals or objectives. Flowing, it's very different from drifting. There's a quote I particularly like from Eisenhower. In preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. So let's see a little bit of what happened these last 10 years. Don't take it as the absolute undeniable truth. It's only my experience. Question everything. And most things you'll only learn by crashing against the wall. And that's totally fine as well. So in 2010, I fell on top of the world. Had my company, I fundraised, I was in magazines, had entrepreneurship awards. It was a lot of what I had imagined that success looked like and what I wanted in life. The things a little bit that you believe during your MBAs. I had a clear plan that seemed to be working. Looking back, my sense of worth was driven a lot by ego and recognition from others. But if you want to talk about thoughts, so we had this amazing contract. Took me 6 months to negotiate and sign, and should have made us a very wealthy and successful company. That same contract took our company down. Also, an investor that said it was putting enough money to take us through the next 2 years of exponential growth had a heart attack. So suddenly things went wrong. I was in Mexico City, sleeping on a friend's couch, trying to make ends meet. By January 2012, I had to close the company and lost most of my savings that I had invested. I broke up a 4-year relationship. My grandmother died. And Darren, one of my best friends, was killed in a really stupid accident in Miami. I was where I had never been before. I felt defeated. I remember being ashamed of going to family parties because I had fundraised money from family and friends, and that money was now all gone. So a very quick lesson here that has been proven right several times over. Be very careful of doing business with friends or family. Most of all, with your romantic partner. Too much at risk for too little gain. So I had no idea what to do next. All my plans were shattered. I remember having coffee with a friend of mine in Lisbon, and she told me the world was going to end on December 21st that year, according to the Mayan calendar. It was February, so I decided, well, if the world is going to end, how am I going to live? And that's what I did. So at the time, my country, Portugal, was going through a deep crisis, and Brazil was a very appealing market for people to immigrate to. I was working in São Paulo, and my friends kept asking me for help on how to move there. So I started a social community on Facebook called Jobs in Brazil for Foreigners, so I could answer everyone at the same time. 4 weeks later, somehow I had 65,000 followers. And suddenly I have the BBC calling me about the community. I remember during the interview on the phone, I kept thinking, this could be an interesting business, and came up with a business model during that same call. So once they asked me what we were going to do, I said we'd provide career advice, immigration lawyers, conferences, and job boards. When I hung up, I started working on it. 1 month later, we had a talk show on national TV, gave paid conferences for over 2,000 people, published a book, and supported many people to move to Brazil. So this paid for my year, and definitely it was a lot of fun. But something more important happened. The universe is far more creative than you and has more interesting paths than the ones you imagine. So during one of these conferences, the director of a top university saw me presenting. And we were chatting during the break, and I mentioned my experience with e-commerce and digital transformation. Weeks later, she calls me and asks me if I want to interview for a position teaching e-commerce at the university. I never wanted to be a teacher and thought I had skipped far too many classes in college to go surfing to actually be a good teacher. But if the world was going to end, what did I have to lose? I did like speaking in public. Actually, my first job was actually as a TV show host. And I knew the subject pretty well. So I took it. This unlikely path took me to finding out one of my biggest passions, education, which I now believe is our greatest tool to change the world. Now I teach over 300 students every year at different universities around the world and have a school here in Mexico. So now I had some money, I was even a professor, but was still completely clueless about what to do next. Many of my peers had very successful careers in banking, consulting, and all those things. Sounds kind of cool, like 10 years later at the TED Talk saying I was lost, but let me tell you that it kept me awake many nights during that year. So I decided to flow and see what happened. If something called my attention and I could afford it, I'd go for it. And I went all over the world. One of the most transformational experiences that came about at this time was a survival course I did in the desert of Utah. So we keep making all these rules for our lives that go against our genetics, our basic instincts as animals, all kinds of diets, the keto, the no carb, everything, relationship formats, and so on. Here, you become the animal you are. I'm not speaking about your spirit animal. No, I'm speaking about the animal, the basic you that needs shelter, food, and sleep. Everything else becomes insignificant and you go back to your basic self. So, curiously, the most things were not how to make fire or eating a rattlesnake, which we actually did. The two key lessons were simple. You have much more in you than you believe. And you are great at finding excuses why you can't do it. You are tired, you are not prepared, etc., etc., etc. If I tell you that most of you have to run a marathon now, you'll tell me you can't. But if it's a matter where your mom's life depends on it, trust me, you'll do it and you're going to break records. The other very important lesson I've learned there was no expectations. By having expectations, you don't enjoy the way, and if things don't happen the way you planned, you feel disappointed, and that brings you down. Also, it closes you to much better things that can happen. So now on a more practical tip that will save you several times. Some people have tattoos. I have scars and broken bones. Paradise becomes hell really quickly. I've had my leg opened down to the bone and had to close it myself after a motorbike accident in Vietnam, ran out of air 20 meters deep in the Great Barrier Reef, had horseback riding falls in the middle of nowhere, and several really dumb accidents. If you do extreme sports, train with the best, learn well. But everyone should take a first aid course. It only happens out of 10,000 times, but then it does, it saves your life and probably someone else's. The world, as you know, ended up not ending in 2012. So it was time to get back to work. I went back to Mexico City and posted on Facebook that I was in town. The VP of Google saw it and told me that there was this large company that was having issues with their e-commerce. So we went for lunch with the director of that company, and she ended up hiring me as a consultant. 2 years later, we had built a company with 80 people. The path to get there, however, was hard. I was trying to rebuild myself, living on my best friend's couch, getting my projects refused over and over again, clients not paying, working long nights to finish a project. But we were a team. It was tough and intense, but we were in it together. Hard times can be great times and a lot of fun. Community, having a cause that is larger than you, and overcoming obstacles together is one of the most fulfilling experiences you can have. Take care of your friends and team. So, although my previous venture hadn't gone well, people considered me hardworking, that I thought out of the box, was honest, and got things done. A couple of things I'm really proud of. When we closed our previous company, the investors put a mention in our last meeting notes that we did everything we could to save it. Several of the people we had to fire when we closed the business joined us later in the new company we created, and some work with us to this day. So education and reputation allow you to rebuild yourself from the ground over and over again. Another thing that I remember that my dad used to tell me when I threw around the word freedom is there is no freedom without financial independence. Being able to fire your boss or your clients because you don't really depend on them financially is one of the biggest assets you can have. Once you have financial freedom, you can change a lot of things in your life at any time if you're not really enjoying what you're doing. So let's go back to 2013. After that initial consulting project, we started growing. One thing led to another, and we created our new company called Leeds Adventures. Leeds stands for Life is Too Short. Adventures because it's about our adventures in the business world. We started by helping companies with their e-commerce and digital transformation. Yes, we know a lot about big data and tech and e-commerce and digital and so on. But what truly differentiated us was that we were helping people change and transform. We are transformation catalysts. Soon, we realized we were making great plans for companies, but they remained just that, plans. Most companies didn't have the capacity and people to implement what we proposed. So we started to help with the people side of things and help them create their vision and support them on that implementation. Great people make great companies and great societies. I found that to drive big changes, you have to take care of yourself. How? By looking at yourself as a top athlete that needs to be in top shape in 4 areas: mind, body, emotional, and spiritual. Once all these 4 are in balance, you'll be able to flow through life like a sphere. And if you see, actually, that's the logo of our company. So mind is about your professional skills, intelligence, logic, things typically very valued in our society, and rightfully so. So keep learning, dedicate at least 30 minutes a day to learn something new. Body is about how you keep yourself in shape. Just ask yourself, if you're given just one piece of clothing for your entire life, how would you take care of it? And then emotions and spirituality. This gets a little more controversial. As a fun fact, we have a shaman in our office, and it has done wonders for our company's morale. My approach here is simple. I can't prove if God exists or doesn't. But if it makes me happier to think that there is something else bigger than us, I'll just go with it. I don't really want to be right. I just want to be happy. You don't need to prove everything in life. 200 years ago, if someone saw a cell phone, they would call it black magic and probably try to burn the person. The fact that science hasn't explained it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Also, some things you can just understand with your heart. It's very hard to explain a sunset to a blind person. I find intelligence often to be overrated and was guilty of judging people in the past by it. Isn't it wonderful to look at the butterfly and just be amazed by it? Is it really better knowing its Latin name? So it always seems that when people like me give these 12-minute talks that is probably longer than 12 minutes now, that we've made it and we live on an ongoing blissful state. But am I happy? I'm in a good place. I'm healthy, sleep well at night, surrounded by great friends and family, love what I do. Our company has a positive impact on our clients and society, pays the bills, and I have the freedom and finances to manage a lot of my time. Life is not an Instagram story with just nice moments. We all have insecurities, tough moments, feel down, feel that the whole world is against us at some time. It is an adventure with ups and downs. The only place you arrive is death. And if there is no hurry for that, until then, might as well enjoy it. Don't take life so seriously. Laugh more, understand what's important, dedicate time to it, and believe in magic. So what are your odds after all this? 99%, you can do anything. Thank you.